Hi there, it's Marcus here. Just letting you know that in this following conversation that we have with Sherman Cruz in the Philippines, that it drops out a couple of times, and there were a couple of minutes where there was nothing happening. So I've cut those bits out largely, and I play a little bit of guitar also to entertain us. It's kind of film music, but anyway, bear with us. It's a great conversation about you could say it's a state of play of futures in and for the global south. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy. Hi there, Marcus here again. I'm sitting here with Sherman Cruz. Sherman Cruz has the honour of being holding the chair, the UNESCO chair of Anticipatory Governance and Regenerative Cities. And that sounds fantastic, and it means you're doing quite a lot of work in your own backyard, your town of Loag, the Northwest University, isn't it, where the chair is hosted. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, Sherman? Tell us how you introduce yourself, to people, rather than me trying to sort of gloss it, because I'll make up all sorts of stories and probably get half of it wrong. So over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcus, for this opportunity to have a conversation with you about futures as a career, as a discipline and knowledge, and then of course how it impacted my life in many ways. So if I'm going to introduce myself to another person who is a stranger and ask me who am I, I would say that I'm an Imagineer, right? Like
Love it.
That's what I do.
Love it.
Right? Like an Imagineer in many different ways, right? I'm always in search of trying to know and understand the things that I don't know. Right, which is pretty quite interesting to me, right? We always have some sort of, borders of about the things that we don't know about, and that's where I'm at currently now. Now, my interest really is, to discover things and
Yeah.
learn more. Those things that I know not, which fires me up, motivates me, inspires me, to really generate that motivation and energy, to learn.
Yeah.
I'm a learner, right? So an Imagineer, a learner, but I'm also strategic as well, right? Like I'm pretty quite, while I try to imagine things, I would love to see, the nuts and bolts of this. Right?
Yeah.
Like we have narratives about the things that we don't know. We get the opportunity to define these things, but then we also want to know the details about these things. How does the things that we don't know about sound like, feel like, right, or look
Yeah.
like? So yes,
That's
that would
fantastic.
be.
Now, I have to say, Sherman is also a musician, writes really cool songs. Maybe you could flick me one of those that I can actually tag to your to this interview, just for the interest of the listeners. You're also a game player, so you've designed a great game, Dreams and Disruptions, and I'll be asking you to tell us a little bit more about that, of course, because it's actually core work for you at the moment. And yet, to get a chair, a UNESCO chair, is a lot of work. It means that you're also, as you said, strategic. So you know how to, what I would say, play the game. You know how to go in there and you can fill out all the forms the right way, give the right kind of answers. And your pedigree is very, very noble in the sense that you were the chair or something like that of the Association of Professional Futurists, and you brought in the global south into that because it was very much a North American gig before that, and you did a wonderful job there. And that was where you and we did some work on Indigenous futures, and we interviewed Laura Harjo, for instance, which is still available on YouTube if you go looking for it. So there's so many things that you've been doing, of course, and you also hold that position at Northwest University. So you've got that academic role, you're guiding students and so on, many things. It's brilliant, Sherman. I don't know how you do it all. So let's get down to business. Tell us how you got into futures. What happened? Where were you? What were you doing? That sort of thing, please.
Yeah, trying to remember those things, how I got into futures, really. Initially, I think it was academic, So taking up my master's then. And then suddenly, my professor in public administration, that would be probably on governance, he introduced this book called Future Shock,
Ah,
right? Like by Alvin Toffler. So, oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. And, and then he asked us to read it. And then suddenly, we had a book in the library at probably like around 2, 3 of his books on future shock and something else. So started like, devouring that book. And it opened up, right? Like my understanding of what governance really is, at least from Toffler's perspective.
yeah.
But then I was just reading it for the sake of reading it for scholarship and academic purposes. Right? And then after that, I was not really into future studies yet, right? Because of course, in those books, it was really just about, anticipatory democracy. But Alvin Toffler did not really introduce future studies until I took up my PhD in political science. Right. And at UP Diliman, that's around like 2007, 2008. And of course, during the time I was studying progressive utilization theory, because I was with Ananda Marga organization at that point and started reading.
That's called Prout, isn't it? Yes.
Yes, Prout and Sarkar's ideology and neo-humanism, among other things. Learning this stuff, including meditation and yoga. I saw the book of Swahili, Understanding Sarkar, in the library of, at the Ananda Marga in Manila. And because they sell it, so I bought that book. And then I read that. And then that was it. And then I emailed Swahili about it. And kindly, Swahili responded to me. He sent me 3 of his books for free. And started reading causal layered analysis. And then through Swahili, I learned about your work, on art, about this healing eye thing that you wrote about.
The Transcending Boundaries book, yeah.
Yes, Transcending Boundaries, alternative futures, those kinds of stuff. The Tantra thing. And that was it. And but then, of course, my interest really, I wanted to pursue PhD in political science and focusing on progressive utilization theory. But I couldn't find anyone who was really interested in those things, in futures and foresight, in some alternative ways of knowing, among others, because at that time, the PhD political science was really into systems analysis, right? It's really American stuff. And since, so American model, like news headlines and systems stuff. And given the fact that I was, doing public policy and governance in the last, probably by around that time as well, I was already in governance work as a volunteer, as a government civil servant, and then as an academician teaching public administration. I got bored at some point.
You got bored.
10 years after.
You're still bored. Come on.
Yeah, because the story was recursive in the sense that you get to see the same news headline, discussions, the network that I was in, what was trapped in that particular type of reality.
Yeah.
And when you're trapped in that conversation, the narrative is always the same. It depletes your energy. You become demotivated. You cannot find any hope anymore. Yeah. Right. And I was really at a low point, right, of the things, like, you just give up because, the headlines that I saw 10 years ago was getting worse. We're moving into a worst case, disowned future stuff. And I was finding for some alternatives. Are there other ways? Of course, I was also into science, right? Like if you try to look into the structure in the way we do research, especially in the Philippines, is that you get to introduce that it has to be quantitative, the statement of the problem, that kind of scientific framework and model.
Yeah.
I was asking if there was something else. And if you ask a science professor, they would say none, right? Because they're not exposed to other, research frameworks.
Yeah.
So I couldn't figure out until I learned about the causal layered analysis, and then just really deep dived into it in the process, and it changed everything for me.
That's a fantastic story. So you took causal layered analysis forward, because when I first met you physically that was, because we'd been in touch before. That was what, 2012 or something. I'm just waiting because it looks like Sherman has frozen. What's going on? Intermission. Good day, Sherman. This is intermission music.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I have to move to my mobile data now, because suddenly there was an internet disconnection.
Yep, no problems at all. I'll just chop that bit out and massage it somehow. So, that was a really, fortunately, I think we dropped out just in time to hear your, finishing off with the CLA, which is cool. Now, I started to saying that when you froze. So you'd been doing this stuff for at least a few years, I guess, because when I met you in 2012 in the Philippines, and if I'm correct, it was 2012, could have been 2013, but I think 12. You were already quite immersed in the futures world, and the Centre for Engaged Foresight, which is on your banner behind you, I think that's been running for quite some time, right? So can you give me, and all of us actually, an insight into, so you find CLA, you've gotten in touch with Sahel, and of course at some point you get in touch with me and presumably a whole bunch of the other futurists around the planet, all right? Can you tell us that next step, please, so that people get an insight into how you ended up landing in this talk today?
Yes, of course, after that, there was a constant mentorship, right? Like communication with Swahil and you eventually, and reading some of the other works, right? At least within that community. So Cesar Villanueva, who during that time was the Secretary General of the World Future Studies Federation, so he linked me to him, and they had a course in Penang, Malaysia at that time. Like that was around 2012 probably, or 2013. Yeah. And Swahil was teaching that course along with some other folks. And Cesar Villanueva facilitated, some scholarship for me with the Right Livelihood College, who was a partner of the World Future Studies Federation. Yeah. So I went to Penang during that time. And along that week was also the World Future Studies Federation supposed to be global conference, but it did not happen. But there was only small, we ended up having a small gathering, but there was a global higher education forum at that time. Now, it was fortunate for me that Jim Dater was there, right? In that course. Yes. He was our first, instructor, in the morning. Jim Dater was there. He talked about, his second law of the future, emerging issues analysis, alternative futures, and then Swahil, and then Ivana, and then probably like around 4, including Cesar. Now, that was my real immersion into foresight. And that changed everything for me, right? Like this is just new. I'm so excited about it. And then having the opportunity to speak with Jim Dater, coffee and everything with Swahil. That was my first time that I saw Swahil at that point, including Ivana and Jose Ramos as well. So there were a lot of insights. I've met everyone at the University of Hawaii, John Sweeney, Stuart Kendi, who at that time were still PhD student at the University of Hawaii. And it was a 2-week immersion. Right?
That's fantastic. Absolutely
fantastic. It was an embodied experience, right? It was just crazy, right? And then the next question was, what I'm going to do about this now, right? Like with all of this knowledge and foresight, knowledge, among other things. And then I had the opportunity to speak with Jose Ramos, because at that time, right, like Jose Ramos was already, I think, the editor at the Journal of Future Studies. Yep. And Jose Ramos suggested to me, Sherman, why don't you set up your own center if you don't have that in the Philippines? That gave me the idea, right? I might as well do it, right? But since I didn't have the experience yet, right? Because you're gonna have to build some experience and background even before you can offer a course in the Philippines at that point and do consulting work eventually in the process, is I would ask the help of Jose Ramos to teach the first course that I would organize in the Philippines. Get some advisorship from the other colleagues as well, and that started it. And I had to shell out a lot of my own personal money just to set up the first futures course.
Yeah.
I did not really earn from it, but of course there were just good enough number of takers, registrants, just to make the first course probably not a failure or not a success as well. But it was just enough, right? To introduce it, because at that point there was no futures and foresight yet in the Philippines. So that was an experience. I saw how a futures course can be organized and run. I learned a lot from Jose on that period, because I collaborated with him on that, setting up the course. What are the things that it was an experience. Yeah.
Very nice. I mean, that's fantastic. So clearly, as you've now got this chair in UNESCO chair, and you're doing further research on river futures, you've written that beautiful piece, which I will share with people on, what's it called? The flow. What did you?
Yeah, I forgot the title, but
I did the same thing. I always forget my own stuff too. But anyway, it's a fantastic piece, and really, it's a beautiful piece, Jose. And Sherman. It's a beautiful piece, and so you're still in it. You're still in it, and you're up to your neck in it, right? What's that like? What's it like now that you've got this established street cred? You've been consulted many times by the Development Institute, or whatever it is, of the futures governance in the Philippines and other places. You've had a lot of experience, let's say, with the APF. That's the Association of Professional Futures. You can find it online and join up if you want. If you want that kind of network. Where are you at, Sherman?
Yeah, it's some sort of really like a journey, if you come to think about it, because at some point, right, you get to learn the tricks of the trade.
Okay. Intermission again. Slide back.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. That's awesome, like the music.
Intermission breaks. We have these intermission breaks where I have to grab the guitar and fill in the space, just with some little ditties. All right. So
yeah, I was about knowing the many multiple plural knowledge base that we have, a foresight practice as well. And then if you get to used to what you're already doing, it becomes monotonous in the process, right? Like you get to be good at what you're doing, really. That you start to some sort of like suddenly, I experience that fatigue along the process, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then probably at that point, I decided I need to learn the things that I need to know, right? Like I need to discover. And given the fact that
I don't know what you don't know, do we?
Yeah. Yes. Right. And I was really like hooked into this practice.
Yeah.
That eventually, you lose sight of the meaning of what you're actually trying to do, including futures and foresight, right? At many different levels. And at that point, I was also questioning the perspective about the tools and methods. Everything was actually like built by the West, and of course embarking as well from the work of Swahil and our friends in Australia and Zia Sardar about including Jim Dater, going back to the text that he did, at least in that part of the world, which is Hawaii, about the global South and the decolonial stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's when I started to wonder that probably I need to know more about epistemology and ontology of foresight. But you cannot, in fact, have enough time to actually do that in practice. So that's where I started reaching out to you, right? About this epistemology stuff, right? Like those things that I need to know now, because probably at this period of my journey of futures, I'm really in search of, meanings. because is this how futures was defined really? Like, is there something else? And when I started reading about epistemologies, just trying to deconstruct things, that I begin to wonder and going back, in fact, on how my ethno-linguistic community, right, like ancestors, see the future.
Yeah.
And that was it. It opened up a lot of insights for me.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, about, for example, Marcus, right, this epistemology stuff, it again, it fired me up, right? Like, it created a new energy in the way I learned about foresight, and of course life as well, right? In 2012, 2013, of course, you get some exposure or exposed to a particular knowledge base wherein you have a set of assumptions about the future.
Yeah.
And the set of assumptions that I learned from Jim Dater and, of course, foresight as we know it today, is that the future is a blank slate, right? That there's no such thing as a future data, right? That you cannot, in fact, predict the future. And then, of course, looking into the Some framework by Joseph Bowles, it begins with the present, right? But then, of course, I also learned about the essential, fundamental view that, of course, you cannot do futures without understanding your past, of course, exposed to the futures triangle and those writings of Sohail about him incorporating, embedding, history in futures and foresight. But then what I would eventually learn as far as, epistemology, probably at least from my own ethno-linguistic context, is that the future cannot be without the past. And that the way they see it, at least linguistically, if you try to deconstruct, is that the future is a continuity of human experience.
Yeah.
That the past, the present, and the future are interconnected. They are entangled. All of these things are entangled.
Beautiful.
There is it's all entanglement, really. Like, whether this particular past is obvious to you because of coloniality, right? Like, they told you that this is the past and there aren't any other past. But then eventually there are also multiple types of past, like your forgotten past, the erased knowledge.
Uh-oh, do I have to grab the guitar again? Maybe I do. Lean over.
Now I'm back with my internet, right? The internet is back. I'm not using my mobile data anymore, right? So let me just pick up from that right away.
Yep.
So and then I suddenly realized, that my ancestors did not see the future in the context of data. It wasn't just it was really about data. Of course, we get to learn about data, from a modernist context, right? Like history, science, and then eventually we get to learn about this data stuff. And now we relate some knowledge base see data as essential. Of course, I do agree that data is reality, and data would definitely
it's one metric. Yeah,
it is right. But then as far as my studies is concerned, when it comes to global South perspectives and let's just say indigeneity in the way we do foresight, is that for them, my ancestors thought about the future as kin, right? That they were trying to make me realize, everybody perhaps probably, they've been trying to tell us in their proverbs and in their journey, in their stories and mythologies and symbols, whatever that might be, is that, you must learn how to build a relationship with the future.
Yeah.
Right? So they have accentuated the value of relationality in the way we learn and practice futures or probably foresight.
Yep. It's
So
beautiful.
it was just like, wow.
Beautiful, beautiful, really, Sherman. So that's where you're at now, in a sense, because I know what you're working on. You're working on river, city, culture, relationships, and they're all nested and entangled, as you just said. And the past and the present and the futures before us they're emergent, but the past is as emergent as the future, because as you say, there's the dominant or hegemonic memory. This is the way the past was. And then there are all these disowned pasts that then filter into possibly futures that might be richer if we can but pick them up. The memory work, that you might say the reconnecting, which is remembering. And you're involved in a lot of that. I think that's beautiful. Pay attention, everybody, because this is a whole other dimension. This is the dimension where indigeneity, the oral traditions that you, Sherman, alluded to, are powerful tools. And they are not, it's not like we have this weird idea in the West, because we're so text-based, I'm surrounded by books, that memory is weak, that you can't pass on the, knowledge orally, because it will degrade. Chinese whispers games that the kids play and so on. But in actual fact, there's so much evidence to the fact that oral communities hold memory and the oral traditions, which are accurate and can be tested materially through data and all the rest. So I think, Sherman, that's fabulous. I'm very excited to hear that.
Awesome.
And epistemology, if you've been wondering about the term and you haven't gone and looked it up yet, basically it's the way we make knowledge, and cultures make knowledge differently. So in the West, there's a Western dominant epistemology, but in actual fact, we can break it up. The French do it their way, the Germans do it their way, the North Americans do it their way. And of course, if you go to the global South, you'll meet another whole, what would we call it? A festival of epistemologies, plural.
I like that.
That's the sort of thing that's happening. So, Sherman, I'm aware of time, so we should be wrapping this up, right? But I want to know, given your experience in getting into futures and everything, what would be your advice to the people taking this course? They're looking at futures, they're thinking, I wonder whether it's for me and all that sort of stuff, or they want to jump in the deep end and do what you did, which was, PhD work and all that sort of stuff. What was your advice, please?
Yeah, reflecting on it now, really, PhD gives you the opportunity to, in fact, just not the immersion probably is not the proper word, might not be accurate enough, but it's a journey of self-discovery, really. That is what the futures is for me. It's some sort of, beyond anticipation. It's really it's an emancipatory journey. That's it.
Attention. That's
it.
That's what Jose Ramos was saying in his interview. He talked about the inner work that we need to do as futurists. It's not something that's just intellectual or built from a kind of academic scaffold. Inner work has to occur.
Yeah, it's beyond rational, really. If, let's just say, each and every one of us, for the purpose of just trying to state this, a choice, right? About what we want to do with life and career and whatever that might be, or scholarship for that matter, it's beyond rational, really. Futures and foresight is beyond rational. It is magic, right? That is what I'm trying to discover now, right? The magic of what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to learn. And PhD, being a PhD student, gives you that opportunity to see what's magical in the things that we're trying to do here, right? I wouldn't be able to know about this magic if I haven't done it. Really.
So we're all going to become Gandalfs and Galadriels, and that sort of stuff out of Lord of the Rings. But it's not everybody in this course is going to do a PhD, and the magic is still there. And we're not trying to sell you on PhDs if you weren't thinking about it. It's PhD is just one avenue, because let's say we talk to Amanda Reeves and some others in these interviews for this course, and they don't have PhDs and they don't need them. So not everybody needs a PhD. It really
Right.
depends the world that you're playing in. But certainly the depth work, that's the reflective depth work that goes with a futures PhD or a foresight PhD, is not quite the same as if you were doing something in business management on, global tourism networks and so on. You know, that would be quite different and much less transformative, I think, of you. But I think any kind of PhD is transformative at some level because you just can't escape the kind of reflective work that goes on there. But PhDs in the futures field are definitely deeply, intimately involved with your own life and the way you experience things. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You know, I think that's the word to put it, like depth, as you've said. Yeah, that's it, right? That captures it a lot.
Okay. Well, Sherman, I want to thank you so much for your time, and we will end here and pick up the story later. I might be coming back to say a whole bunch of students have asked questions. Let's get together and drag you in, and we can have a chat with some of the students in this course. So thank you, Sherman.
Thank you, Marcus.